against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half-slave and half-free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the House to fall, but I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all another. This is part of the House Divided speech by Abraham Lincoln. How does it tie into our topic today, though, about the qualifications to be president of the U.S.? The thing is that I believe that a person cannot be divided. They will either act in one way or another. We all have a set of beliefs that rule how we act towards other people. This is my thesis for today, and I will back it up with several different points. First being the criteria of an excellent president. There are many criteria involved for being a leader of a nation. A few involved are 1, competence, 2, communication, 3, courage, and 4, compromise. All of these key elements play into how good a president is towards his people and how he leads his nation. And all of these are backed up by Americans, their own opinions. News stations have actually put these together as some key components to being a great leader of a nation. But it doesn't just start when that president steps into his office. It actually starts when he is young, during his personal family life, where he is raised and where he grows up and how he is to overcome the difficulties that lie in his personal life. This was proven by a couple different people, including George Washington, our first president. He was said to have, when he was a boy, to have great honesty. There's a story that goes around that there was a cherry tree, and he chopped it down with his little axe, and his father came up to him very sternly, asked him, "So, where's the cherry tree?" And George Washington looked at his father and said, "Well, I cannot tell a lie, and I chopped down the cherry tree." But this story, whether it's true or not true, shows the integrity of George Washington in his private life, and that extended through his presidential terms. And he was able to carry this through, and we still respect him as a great leader. Another example is Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was a perfect example of someone who dealt honestly and truthfully and well with people in his personal life, and that carried into his presidency as well. He was said to have accidentally overcharged a lady at his store before he became president, and it was just like 10 or 15 cents. But he felt so bad about it when he realized his mistake that he actually walked like a couple miles that evening after he closed up shop just so he could make that right with her. Even today, we look back and see Abraham Lincoln was a very honest man and very full of integrity throughout his terms. This began before he even stepped into office and proves that personal life and private behavior does affect how one is president of the United States. So all these aspects of the president's character do matter, because in the end, relationships are key. How we treat other people defines how good a job we do with anything. And as I've said, that a person cannot be divided. When we just look over George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, we see that they certainly did lead lives of integrity in their personal lives as well as in the presidency. So we can look to a quote by Francis Beckwith. He is a professor of philosophy and political science. He said that it is impossible for politics not to take a moral position. When we go into office, anyone who goes into office, they're taking a moral position, and those morals lead up to how they live their lives in the public realm. So as we look towards this debate and this thesis of whether or not a person's private behavior directly and deeply affects their qualifications to be president of the United States, we see that is in fact true.
So I'm pretty sure most of us would rather have an honest and respectable president rather than a liar or a hypocrite, am I right? Looking at their private behavior can definitely tell us a lot about them. So a person's private behavior has almost everything to do with their qualifications to be president of the United States. First, we'll look at how private behavior is a direct indicator of character. Second, I'll tell you why a presidential candidate needs to have good character in order to gain respect and honesty from the American people. And third, I'll tell you why a presidential candidate needs to have good character in order to be an effective leader. So first, private behavior is a direct indicator of character. Eric Ringham, a journalist of NPR News, says that what someone does in private is who they really are. This is shown to be true in every situation. People don't have to worry about outsiders seeing them or judging their actions when they're in private. They feel comfortable in places they consider private, so they won't hold anything back. The root of the word character, Gail Sheehy says, is the Greek word for engraving. As applied to human beings, it refers to the enduring marks left by life that sets one apart as an individual. Private behavior can be one of these marks. It definitely shapes personality because it makes someone the person that they are by setting a norm for their behavior. How they act in private will eventually become how they act everywhere else. So now that we've talked about why private behavior is a direct indicator of character, we'll move on to my second point, which is a presidential candidate needs to have good character in order to gain respect and honesty from the American people. So if a presidential candidate doesn't have good character, obviously people aren't going to vote for them. If they're not honest, people will see right through their act, and they don't want that to be their president. Research has shown in the past that in presidential elections, most people don't vote on issues. They vote on the character of the presidential candidate. You don't want to elect a liar, because if someone's a truly untrustworthy person, they're going to be untrustworthy in their office as well. So the president has a lot of power, so we need to make sure that they will do well. They will do the right things with it. President Clinton lied about his affair with Monica Lewinsky, and it raises a lot of questions. What could he have lied about in the office? Nobody wants a hypocrite for a president. No one wants to elect someone who acts in one way in private and completely different in public because it looks suspicious. If a president is a hypocrite in their personality, then they're most likely going to be a hypocrite in office. You don't want to elect someone whose private life seems to be falling apart either. If they can't handle the stress of everyday situations, how are they going to handle the stress of the things that happen for the country? Time magazine says there's a portion of the character of any president never glimpsed on before that emerges under the pressures of his office. Pressure may turn them into a horrible person who doesn't know what they're doing, and it could have horrible effects on the country. The events of the private life of a president indicate how their time in the office will go. So if they are stressed out about something in their private life, something small, then obviously they're going to get stressed out about something in office that's way bigger. So now that I've talked about how private behavior is a direct indicator of character and how a presidential candidate needs to have good character in order to gain respect and trust from the American people, I'll move on to my third and final point, which is that a presidential candidate needs to have good character in order to be an effective leader. Now, Michael Lyons, who is a published psychology journalist, says that presidency is narrow, and therefore effective leadership depends largely on personality-related intangibles such as the reputation, persuasiveness, political skills, and self-confidence of the office holder. These are very important qualities for a president. Time magazine also says that in order to be an effective leader, one must possess the qualities of decency, honesty, intelligence, and courage. Obviously, we want an honest leader. We want someone who isn't going to do the wrong things with their power, and we want someone who's smart and who knows what they're doing. So if a leader doesn't have good character, obviously the people that they're leading won't want to follow them. So I've told you about how private behavior is an indicator of character, and how someone needs to have good character in order to be an effective leader and to have people voting for them, someone who's honest and someone who is intelligent. So now that I've told you all these things, I hope you'll realize that private behavior has almost everything to do with someone's qualifications to be president of the United States.
Listen carefully. A person's behavior has almost nothing to do with their qualifications to be President of the United States. exactly are the qualifications, though? We can make things up about what we think a president should be. We can go straight to the source. So let's do that. First, I'm going to talk about the Constitution's qualifications. Then I'm going to talk about how negative press can not affect anything to do with the approval rates. And then I'll move on to talk about how positive press can do the same thing and keep the approval rates pretty much the same. So the qualifications for a president are set solely by the Constitution. The Constitution says a presidential candidate must be 35 years old, a citizen, natural born, and living in the United States for 14 years, according to the Constitution, Article 2, Section 1. These qualifications make a citizen have a strong American identity. If you are naturally born American, that is who you are. That can lead to patriotism and knowledge of your own country. Living in a country for that long as well can bring strong political opinions through personal experience as well. There's a higher likelihood of maturity with the age of 35, and that gives a president the ability to deal with the high stress that naturally comes with a job of this power. But it also has the ability, or it gives you the ability to work with opposing views in a mature way. Based on behavior, the Constitution says a president can be impeached for the conviction of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. That's it. Impeachment is completely separate from private behavior. Crime within the office is as personal as it is business related. It's not your private behavior, what you do as your character necessarily. It's one single act. And private behavior has much more to do with social interactions, actions outside of the office, rather than inside and general beliefs. So reasons for impeachment are politically based, not personally based. So for example, a president wouldn't be impeached for having an extramarital affair because that's not a crime, that's just something that society would look down on. So to kind of move into that, Bill Clinton infamously had an extramarital affair with Monica Lewinsky, as my opponent had already mentioned, while he was in presidency. And the assumption is usually that he got impeached for having this affair, but that's actually not what it is. He actually was impeached because he lied under oath. So that would be considered perjury. So now that we've kind of talked about the general kind of constitution-based behavior that's outlined, we can kind of move on to the press and what we see as private behavior not really affecting the approval rates. So continuing with this Bill Clinton theme, he admitted to his affair in August of 1998. He stood before his country and admitted to having an inappropriate relationship with her, and he lied to his wife and his daughter. That is something that society would look down on. However, he actually had approval rates up to 60% during this time, and in 2001, according to Gallup's polls, his approval was at 66%. That's very high for somebody who has just dealt with something that would be usually shameful. And it's a good example of how behavior doesn't really define how good of a president you are. He's still known as a very good president, one of the best. In terms of approval rates, he is one of the best. During the entire time of his kind of scandal, he had 55 to 60% approval. So, despite his questionable choices in his private life, he's still considered one of the best presidents of all time. And to kind of go with that theme of extramarital affair and scandal, Grover Cleveland, he was president from 1885 and 89, and again in 93 and 97, or through 97, sorry. He fathered an illegitimate child before he was even president, and paid for it to end up going into an orphanage. Basically paid off his baby mama. And so he came out with this, he was really honest, and he was elected not only once, but twice. And he also had very high approval ratings. And this is actually where the term "Mama, where's my paw" in the White House, ha ha ha. If anybody has heard that, that was his opponent's big attack on him for not having a legitimate child, and he still won and is very well known as a good president. So that is sort of the bulk of what I'm talking about, where social scandal and all of this bad behavior doesn't really affect how you lead your country. So to kind of flip that on its end, let's move on to positive.
Thank you very much.
My opponent has brought up some excellent points about the private behavior of a president and how that does or does not affect a person's qualifications to be president. But I have just a couple responses to her points. First of all, when she brought up the issue of impeachment and that it's not based on private behavior. In the example of Clinton, he had an affair and he lied to cover up that affair. My response to her argument that he was not impeached because of his affair, but rather for lying to Congress and to the nation, I would say, first of all, that he lied to cover up an issue with his private behavior, something he had done in his private behavior. If he hadn't done that in the first place, he wouldn't have had to lie to cover that up. Also, my second response is that his lowered standards in his private life led to his dishonesty and his betrayal of the American nation by lying to the people. This was simply setting a precedent or a pattern in his personal life that led to even bigger and more wrong decisions in the public realm. This clearly sets a precedent. It doesn't just stop there in the personal life. When we see decisions either for good or for bad, for honesty or for dishonesty or so on, we see those same decisions carried out in the public realm. We can't simply live two separate lives. Each of us have a set of beliefs, a worldview by which we live. And pretty soon, we have to live by those standards. We cannot separate the two. She also brought up that there are approval ratings that rated that Clinton and other presidents who committed certain things in their personal behavior were actually approved by the American nation and are called some of the best presidents. My main response is that actually that is off topic because public opinion can actually be misguided. We can look back and, like, Clinton was a very controversial public figure, and some people still respect him as a leader and thought he was great. Others do not. But we cannot simply listen to public opinion about this. He chose to lie and to have an affair, and that was detrimental to our society. Public opinion sometimes is misguided. It may change here and there, and our topic is not what Americans may think about our president afterwards, but whether or not that president's private behavior affects how good a president he is. That's our topic for today's debate, and I don't think we should turn
Thank you very much.
to public opinion.
So my partner covered quite a lot of things that my opponent has said, but just to cover a couple that she didn't. My opponent said that the qualification that someone needs to be president come directly from the Constitution, but there are some legal qualifications such as those, but there are also some unspoken qualifications that are kind of anticipated when you're elected to be president of the United States. And these are obviously honesty and decency and intelligence. So a president is kind of expected to have these qualities, and so they'll be a good, respectable leader. And without these qualities, they would be a lying coward who doesn't know the first thing about leading any kind of group, not to mention the entire country. She also said that a president is not elected to be a moral leader, but even so, a president should still be a respectable and moral person so that they can lead the country in the right way and make just good decisions for everyone. She said that even though they are elected, In a way, they're kind of like a moral leader, anyway, because people see what they do. So she talked about Clinton and his affair, and people see that and they take that into consideration, and it kind of makes an impact on their lives because they take that as an example of what an upright person. That's how they see the president. So when the president does things like that, then it unconsciously influences their attitudes towards the president and the country. And so they see a person who's supposed to be upright and reputable, and it makes them wonder why the president is doing this. And because the president's behavior is an example to the entire country. And this is why these are some examples of why a president needs to be an honest person, and why their private behavior affects their public behavior, and definitely affects their qualifications to be president of the United States.
Thank you very much.
So to go off of what my opponents have been saying, I have some responses for them. The topic of Clinton lying to cover up his affair and lowering his standards in life, his sexual relationships should not define our country's policies. It's none of our business who he has sex with, and yes, he did get impeached for lying. And I will agree that being honest is definitely important, but being honest is different than who you're having sex with. The reason he was impeached was because he was lying. Never mind the reason he lied. And yes, that's wrong, but I don't think that his sexual relationships, that's his choice, not ours. So we can't really be the judge of that. And to kind of play off of another thing that's not really our choice, saying that approval rates are public opinion and it's off topic. Presidents are elected by us. Presidents are presidents because we've chosen them. So our approval matters because that's why they're in office. So it is definitely not off topic because their qualifications are chosen. Whether or not they're qualified is chosen by us. So we have to follow up and give those approval rates and, keep judging to see if they are leading our country in the way that we had elected them to do so. So for the Constitution, the unspoken rules, I would definitely agree that honesty is a big one, but I think that it's not as important as things that are explicitly written down and signed and historically something that our entire country is based on. And intelligence is given, and I had already talked about that you are knowledgeable in your country because you live there and you're a natural born citizen. That is knowledge and intelligence, and I did touch on that. So to kind of continue on what I was saying earlier, just very quickly, to kind of flip everything on its tail end, positive press doesn't necessarily affect approval rates either. Obama is seen as a really cool guy, and The Week interviewed him and said that he listened to Jay-Z and all of these things, but his approval rates
Thank you very much.
are 43%.
Quick closing statements, 3 minutes.
One of the real misses of our society is that social life doesn't affect professional life, and it does. That is a quote by Nancy Rothbard, a management professor at the University of Pennsylvania. She was talking about jobs in general, and I think that extends to the office of the presidency. I'm going to go over a couple of points that we've hit on today, including first about the morality of our president. I would just say that every leader is a moral leader, no matter what station we're at, whether it's down at a small business or president of the United States. we are all moral leaders. Going back to my quote by Francis Backlund, he said that it is impossible for politics not to take a moral position. Also, going over the point that can we keep our personal and our public lives separate? I would go on saying that we can't, but also even if someone could be different in their public life than in their personal life, do we want a leader, a president of our nation, to be able to act different than who he really is to his family and to his friends? I would say probably not. Another point that was brought up is, what is the topic of this debate? Should we be looking to approval ratings, as our opponent brought up? And I would say, first of all, that we need to focus on whether or not the statement today is true or false. If a person's private behavior affects their qualifications to be President of the United States. And this is just the thing that we should focus on today. And public opinion may change and differ depending on the society we live in, but we should focus on the truth of the statement, not what consensus said in today's world. And finally, we should look to a quote by Sam Adams. He said that he who is void of virtuous attachments in private life is, or very soon will be, void of all regard for his country. There is seldom an instance of a man guilty of betraying his country who had not before lost the feeling of moral obligations in his private connections. We can see from this quote by Sam Adams, who was a senator and a founding father of the United States, that the decisions we make in our personal lives have a great effect of what decisions we make in our public lives. And for the President of the United States, the leader of our nation, I think that is a very important truth to remember.
Closing statement, 3 minutes.
So just to address one final thing that my opponent has said, she said that the president, well, I was just saying that the president sets an example for the people, and as a president, they are showing us what our country is about, and lying like Clinton did to cover up his affair is definitely one of those things that is an example of what a president shouldn't be. A president needs to be honest in order to have people support him. So my argument was mostly based on character. How character is the most important quality that a president needs to have in order to be a good leader and to be able to lead their people with honesty and with much support from their people. This being said, private behavior has everything to do with the qualifications to be President of the United States.
Closing statement, you may have up to 4 minutes.
Okay, well, I'm actually going to keep this short and sweet. We have all messed up. If I look around this room right now, I could not point out one person that has not lied or made a mistake. Our generation, somebody in this generation is going to become president, and they are going to mess up when they're president. It happens. And unfortunately, presidents, they have to make their peace with the fact that their life is public. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not apt to lead a country. It just happens that things are scrutinized, and I'm not saying that anything that you do that's wrong is not, they're not held to a different standard. They're still human beings. And I'm not saying that lying is morally right or that they should be excused from it necessarily, but we have to be reasonable in saying that they can still be president and lead a country to be successful and mess up. It happens, you know? It's not something that just doesn't happen because you have a high-powered job. So I think I've kind of gone over everything kind of multiple times, so I'm just going to leave with this. A person's private behavior does not affect the qualifications of a person to become president.